Here today. He's friends with Chris. He was the conductor in the pit and the pianist for your play Rent that just happened. So talented. So we're always so blessed to have talented people helping us out around here and doing that. So glad to have you today. Awesome. On July 4th, 1776, a group of colonists declared that all people are created equal, endowed with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Last week we talked liberation. This week we're talking more about liberty. We're focusing on liberty this week. This is part 2 of this 3-part series of 250 as we get closer to the anniversary of the birth of this country. And in Philadelphia, I don't know if anybody has seen that. Who here has seen the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia? Quite a few of you. Very good. It's cool. So we know it's cracked. Kind of debates of the story behind the Liberty Bell. Did it crack the first time they rang it? Did it crack later on? There's some debates of that. But if we just went with, the idea that it cracked the very first time, that's kind of the more endearing one. It's kind of interesting that it cracked. Now it just sits behind glass safe for people to look at, visited by millions of people every year, but there's an inscription on it. I didn't know if anybody knew about the inscription and that it came from the Bible. And it says, to proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. That's inscripted on the Liberty Bell from Leviticus 25:10. Interesting book to pick an inscription. Leviticus is an interesting book. But what I think is interesting about using that scripture and Leviticus to put on that is that that is from about a people who were enslaved that are now free. And these are instructions that are being given to show them how to live in a free way, opposite of the ways they had been living when they were enslaved by Egypt. And so one of the things, the instructions here is to go proclaim liberty. Proclaim it to all the inhabitants, right? We're breaking through these chains of slavery. We're liberating people. And I picked this order in particular. I started with liberation because I don't think you can get to liberty, to get to freedom, if you're still enslaved, right? You have to break the chains to have freedom. And then when you can live with liberty and have freedom, well, you can have life. If we restrict that, if we punish people, if we control that, we control their life. We control how much life they get to live. And so I'm working this order in a very particular way. And I think all 3 of these are themes, life, liberty, and liberation, are all themes that we can find in our founding documents and also in Scripture. These can be values that we live into, no matter where we kind of situate ourselves, whether we're a non-believer in this country or whether we're a Christian in this country. We can fight and stand up for the very same things. And the working definition I'm going with today for liberty is the state of being free within a society from restrictions imposed by authority, giving individuals the power to act, speak, and think without arbitrary control. And I think that last little part, without arbitrary control, is kind of important. And as Gene was kind of talking about, having freedom doesn't give you a license to go do whatever you want to whoever you want, however you want. That's not freedom. Liberty is not power without accountability. If we talk freedom a lot, but if you don't have some rules and regulations and some framework, you got chaos. You got absolute chaos. And I learned this well in my very first lock-in, 16 years ago. 50, 60 kids show up. I'm in youth ministry at the time. I'm thinking, I was a teenage boy at one time. I didn't like anybody telling me what to do. I think it'd be great if we have a lock-in with no structure. Yeah, You're laughing, right? You're already catching on. We don't need structure. We have a gym, and we were smart, and the gym is boarded up with plywood. Then we put the drywall on top. So you could lock the doors, keep the kids just enclosed in there, let them run free, kill each other. It'd be fine. We're not going to damage anything. I don't know what my thought was. No schedule, no rules, have at it. I had kids locking themselves in the bathroom because other kids wanted to fight those kids. I had comments and cussing and all sorts of stuff. I had kids making out in the elevator. I'm like, oh my God. The next day, I formed a group of leadership for my youth. And the senior in the group said, Chad, you messed up and it's got to get fixed. I'm like, yeah, help me. And they determine kind of how things get set up and the rules and the order and the schedule. And they're like, we need structure. So we have to have structure. Freedom, we can move a little more freely, actually, when we have structure, when we have rules that kind of govern us, that tells us what we can and cannot do. Otherwise, boy, the weak ones are locking themselves in the bathroom because they're afraid of the powerful and the strong ones. Liberty is the protection of personhood. It's the guardrails as a society that we erect to keep those in power from crushing everybody else. And that turns out to be an actual very biblical idea. Right? As I talked about, the words that are on the Liberty Bell are from Leviticus, and it comes from the time of Jubilee. And I'll expand on Leviticus 25:10. It says, you shall hallow, right? You shall honor, you shall keep it holy, the 50th year, and you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. You shall return, every one of you, to your property, and every one of you to your family. This is an ancient Hebrew practice. It's a reset button. And for those who are unfamiliar about the Jubilee, I talked about this last week, they forgive every 50 years. Forgive all the debt you have. Oh, I'm 49 and a half. 6 more months. I'm going to go get some credit cards real quick. I don't know how this thing works. But we don't do that. But they did it. They set the slaves free, and they were able to return to their family. They gave the land back to people. It was a reset button for it all. So nobody could ever accumulate too much to where they can continue to harm other people. And the prophets, they carry this theme throughout the Hebrew scriptures too. And I love the prophets. The prophets carry it. Because if you go to Isaiah goes really strongly against leaders who make unjust laws that are robbing the poor of their rights. Amos rages against those who sell the needy for a pair of sandals. Micah distills it all down to a single sentence, and he says about doing justice, about loving kindness, and walking humbly with God. God's vision that's repeated century after century, over thousands of years in the Hebrew Bible, is of a society where the powerful cannot arbitrarily oppress the powerless. They cannot do it. It's where the widow, the orphans, the vulnerable, everybody who's on that margin of society, the foreigner, are all protected. And I think those same individuals need protection today. Liberty is not a human invention. We didn't create it. We didn't create it when we made this country. It wasn't like other places didn't have freedom. They did. We didn't create liberty. We didn't create freedom. That came all the way back from God. Which I know it sounds interesting because we talked about this a little bit last week about, boy, if you read the Bible one end to the other, they make a good account for slavery is okay. And we made some criticisms last week to the founders of the country who wrote those letters about all people being equal. These are white slave-holding men that wrote that. It is not about a present time. The present time is broken. It's about a future hope. It's about the hope of what this country can be. It's about the hope of what we as a people can be. Because when we see it, even as we get to Jesus, we see someone who is trying to free people from the enslavement of the society in these different ways that they are enslaved and literally enslaved. It's what Jesus declares when he unrolls that scroll in the synagogue and reads from it. He makes his declaration of ministry. I come to set the slave free. I come to put sight to the blind, right? This is what Jesus' ministry is. When Jesus arrives, he's in this major system of overlapping control. The Roman Empire is big, it's strong, it's dangerous. It's overtaken the world. It's a powerful, powerful empire. And then you have the religious order that sold out to it. They sold out because they wanted to uphold their power. They wanted to maintain even the ministers and the priests. They wanted to be honored walking through the town. They wanted to be honored, have honor when they sat at the tables. It's a form of what we would call today Christian nationalism. And we see this throughout history, not so much so in our country, but you could look at other countries when they've gone down this path. I'm reading the diary of Anne Frank right now because I'm going to be going to Amsterdam. Me and Jessica thought, we should probably read that. That'd be great. I've never read the whole thing. It's fascinating. We also know it's terribly tragic. At the same time, I'm reading another book that's very interesting. It's a book written by one of Hitler's bodyguards. And it's interesting, and I read these at the same time, just getting these two interesting viewpoints of what's going on at this time in this world. But the church sold out to Hitler. They went to bed with Hitler. They did the work of him. One of my ministry idols, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, said, no, I'm not doing that. Absolutely not going to do that. I'm going to hold true to the real gospel. Now, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was martyred for it. But we see this again and again, how powerful empires use religion to control people and the message that keeps them in power. And it takes some real courage for us to speak against that. And we can see this in Jesus. Jesus walks and gives us an idea of what liberty is in the Gospels. He comes across a woman who's been bent over double for 18 years, literally cannot stand upright, and he straightens her up. Freedom. She can live. She's been liberated from her affliction. He sees a man who's been excluded from the community because of his skin disease. He is touched, he is healed, and he is reintegrated back into society. Well, what's it mean when we close our doors off to people for who they are, for what they may look like, for what they may bring into our space? Ooh, we want all people, but not those people. We want you if you assimilate to the way we want things done. Jesus says, no. That's not right. That's why he invites so many people into his life. He shows us an example of radical inclusion that makes sure everybody has a place at the table, including a tax collector who's defined entirely by his complicity with the empire, not liked at all by people. But he is one of those people that gets invited to dinner. A woman who is caught in adultery, violating the law of the day, who's set to be stoned, but releases her from the verdict of those who want to stone her. He also frees those who want to stone her. He frees the one who's being oppressed, and he frees the oppressor from committing murder. Jesus says in John 8:32, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. The truth is, if you want to fulfill the law, love. Love fulfills the law. And Jesus goes on to say a few verses later, anyone who sins is a slave to sin. Jesus has come to set us free from sin, not just through the forgiveness of sins. That's one way, sure. but to say, hey, there's a whole other way to live life. This isn't it. This power and this hoarding wealth and all, this isn't it. This is it. This, to bring kingdom come, it's to love. It's to care for your neighbor. It's to release the burdens that makes life so incredibly difficult so we all can enjoy life together. To hoard wealth and to oppress others, we'll start with that. To oppress others, to maintain your position, your status, and power, that's sinful. If you're choosing to oppress others so you can maintain your status, that is sinful, period. To hoard wealth, as an example, in 2011, in 2011 years since the birth of Jesus, I'm going to be clear on this, took 2,000 years to have enough billionaires that they had $4 trillion in worth. In the last 15 years, that's gone up to $18 trillion. Huh? It is sinful. It is sinful to have a system that creates and hoards such wealth, while 60% of Americans, by recent data, say are living paycheck to paycheck. Where 48 million people, that's greater than 10% of this country, need food assistance. Where medical debt is still the number one reason for bankruptcy. The National Association of Home Builders reveals this recently that roughly 75% of households cannot afford a median-priced home. 3/4 of this country cannot afford to buy a house. Whew. What? If you have a home, you are privileged. And I know you hate that word. You are. When you can have something that 3/4 of the people can't, you're privileged. Now, you've worked your butt off for it, I bet you, right? But here's the difference. It requires an income today of $141,000 to buy a medium-priced home. I don't have a home. Jess and I don't have a home. We can't afford a home. And we're not complaining about our pay at all. We're very happy with our pay. You guys are generous to us. How is it in a world that my congregation can be generous and I still can't buy a house? Think about that. My kid, neither of my children are saving for a home. I bought a home when I was 21 years of age on less than a combined income of $60,000. That was less than 30 years ago. No, not quite 30 years ago. 28. Still. Close enough. You have to double that income in the last 28 years just to get a medium-priced house. We have priced out the next generation. My kids will not get the great wealth transfer of an asset like a home, which is one of the best ways to transfer wealth. They will not know, as of right now, like my son serves in the military. He's got a good job. Can't buy a home. Because they can't buy a home because he's ready to have a baby. How are you going to afford to have a baby and also have a home? Do you know that my son serves in the military and is $3 a month away from affording to qualify for food stamps? Do you know that? We want to take care of our military? Pay them. So they don't have to worry about where their meal is coming from when they have to serve on our behalf. That's the reality of today's situation for people and how fast it's changed in under 20 years. And in Jesus, we see someone who confronts this system in his day that takes liberty away. I mean, where's the freedom when 60% of us are one paycheck away from never catching up again? If you're on fixed income, prices of gas and food and taxes go up, you're hurting. This isn't the way it's designed to be. And Jesus goes out there and he challenges the system. He challenges the money changers in the temple who've turned this sacred space into an instrument of economic extraction, right? He cheated. People were cheating people when they exchanged money. He calls out the scribes and Pharisees for loading people with religious burdens they themselves won't carry. He says to the disciples who are jockeying for power, oh, no, won't be you if you're going to act like that. Jesus is a dangerous kind of free person because he is not afraid. He knows his mission, he knows his purpose, and he's going to do what is right by his call and do what is right by the kingdom. Jesus never weaponizes, though. His religious convictions, he has them, and he speaks about them, and he shares them, but he does it in love. He invites, he heals, he challenges, he commissions. He doesn't threaten. He tells his disciples, if people don't want to hear it, move on, dust off your feet. He grants salvation to people that we would look at and go, are you for certain? The man on the cross who has never taken a Bible study or been baptized? The man who gets lowered down in the house and gets healed, and he says, you are saved because of your friend's faith. Jesus is countercultural. The liberty he offers is always a gift. It's never mandated by power. And that matters. It matters right now because the separation of church and state is very important. And I want to be clear that the separation of church and state is not a threat to any kind of religious liberty. Right? The First Amendment to the Constitution says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. There's two clauses. The Establishment Clause that says the government cannot officially endorse or oppose any religion, and the Free Exercise Clause that says the government cannot stop you from practicing your religion. Together, they created a protected space in which our genuine religious liberty can actually exist. Now, there's been some debate recently. Thomas Jefferson wrote those words, separation church and state, in a letter in 1802 to some Baptists who were worried about government interference. But that's been reaffirmed through Supreme Court rulings since the birth of this country over and over again. And it's always been interpreted that there's a separation of church and state by the First Amendment to the Constitution. But this is important because just the other day, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas said the separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. He's correct. It's not. But again, it's been implied by the First Amendment and again, upholded multiple, and many times by the Supreme Court. The Lieutenant Governor's goal is to bring faith into government, his faith, his belief, his way of practicing it. And that's dangerous. It moves us closer to Christian nationalism. And here's the major point about this. The church down the street that I don't agree with, they get to practice their religion how they want to practice it. They get to host whatever services they want, and he can stand on a pulpit and say whatever he wants. You know what I get to do? Same thing. And we get to have disagreements. We get to debate it. We can go out and sit down and have a conversation. We can yell at each other if we wanted to. We cannot hurt each other. We cannot commit violence to one another. And I'm going to stand up for his right to do that and to preach what he wants to preach and sing the songs they want to sing in that church because it matters so we can do it here as well. It matters for all of us. Because what happens? What happens if that one minister or that one person gets into power and says, my faith is going to control the land? I bet you there's plenty of people out there that wouldn't like it if I got into power, became the president, and my faith became the law of the land. Would we like it if somebody who was Muslim got into power and Sharia law became the law of the land? Would you like it if an atheist became into power and said, you know what? Religion seems to do a lot of damage. I'm going to do away with religion. No more religion. None of us are going to be too happy about that. So protecting religious liberty for all helps us all. It's important for all of us, not just for the ones that agree with us. And liberty in America is not evenly distributed. There are forces always working to take that away. We're always got to work against those forces. And we got to work together. We got to work together in this. We may disagree. That's okay. That's what we get to do. It's America. But we're going to work together to protect that right. Because theocracy wears the costume of liberty. And I say this not as a political statement, but a theological statement. Prophets, when they didn't hold their tongues and they questioned the powerful, Jeremiah was thrown into a cistern. Amos was told to leave town, and Isaiah's words got him killed. Yet, there's hope. There's still hope. Because this nation, over the last 250 years, has caught itself going in the wrong direction. And we've corrected course constantly. We've worked for the good and the betterment of humankind. Hasn't been easy. People have lost their lives for it. And we need to know their names. But the course has been corrected, and we can still correct course when we see ourselves going the wrong way. People of faith have been at the center of that. When others who hold opposing views and want to place their belief as a law of the land, people of faith have gathered around and said, no, we can't do that. That is not right. So who are we being called to be as a church today, like people who came before us? Well, we're called to be people for liberty. When we don't, the freedoms of others restricted. It says, my religious beliefs and rights matters, and yours are a threat to mine. It says liberty means I can do what I want, and what I want is for everyone to live the way I think they should. I always think when it comes up to the topic of like gay marriage, like again, I talked about this last week, it doesn't affect my marriage if two guys want to get married or two women. I don't care, and I'm going to stand up for that right. It doesn't bother me. Live your life if you love someone. Now, there are lines of harm. Hopefully, we know marrying an underage child is wrong. Yet, Tennessee is trying to pass that law. Somebody submitted that it was okay to do that. But these are things at times that we got to stand up for, so that way we can all live free. We can have liberty. Paul says in Galatians 5:13, for you were called to freedom. Brothers and sisters, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become servants to one another. Paul's been writing to a community that's been told by the gospel that they are free. And he immediately says, great, go use that to serve others. So here's my commission. Defend the liberty of all people. Defend it for all people. Because the test of whether we actually believe in liberty is not what we do when it's easy, but what we do when it costs us something. Insist on the separation of church and state. Not because your faith is private, not because faith has no place in public life, but because genuine faith refuses to use government as its enforcement arm. Speak from your convictions. Vote from your conscience. And trust that a God who chose to come to us as a helpless infant, not as a conquering emperor, never intended to be spread at the point of a sword or as an act of Congress. And tell the truth. The most liberating thing we can do is just simply tell the truth about history, about power, about where we're at. Share stories about who is free, who is not yet free, the work we need to do and get serious about. Truth-telling is an act of love. It's also an act of liberty. Now back to that picture of the bell. It's cracked. It has been since the first day it rang, as some say. This experiment of America is imperfect. It always has been. But the words are still there. It's cast in bronze, borrowed from God's own covenant with people. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. All the inhabitants, not some, not the deserving, not the ones who believe correctly or vote correctly or look the way we think we should look. All. 250 years in, that word all is still the unfinished work. And we still, the people, are being called to finish it. May we do the hard work to proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all the people. Amen.